On Friday, April the 13th, legendary streamer Tyffee went on a hiatus to experience the world outside of streaming. During this time, he has completely disappeared. Until now he has been a ghost, lost to the world, until now. We have found evidence that he is still alive out there, somewhere. A lone journal was found just outside the limits of Mark Twain National Forest, Missouri, recanting the last known words of this famed streamer. These are his words.
I awoke in the forest amongst ash and leaves, and in the distance glowing of embers of a long-forgotten family retreat. Last I remembered, I was being chased by a horde of those who wanted to do me wrong. I'm not even sure what day it is anymore. Has it been 6 days? 7? I felt like I've been here for weeks. One thing is for sure, I have to get off of this mountain. If I don't, I'll never be able to stream again. I'll never hear Twitch chat's happiness for my return. As I peeled my face from the wet leaves below me, I realized rain falling like glitter from the sky. It was a light rain, the first thing to not beat down on me since I arrived at this mountain. Did I have a dream last night? I was almost certain that I did. I only remember fragments of it though. I dreamt of power welling up inside me until I was ready to burst. It felt familiar. I came to this mountain to feel better, but now even if I do leave here, I feel like I will only have left worse. I stood up, shaking off the grogginess of what I assumed to be a full day's passing, and full of unwillingness, I pressed forward down the mountain. The rain felt most refreshing. After I walked for some time, I would pull my rain-soaked shirt up to take a sip from the water that laid in its threads. With each clumsy step I felt a little better. I'm not sure if it was because I was closer to home, or because I was a little bit further away from the monastery. Twigs and thorns whipping against my now exposed shins. Each whip to my torn pant legs were a quick reminder that I could just lay down and quit. I feel like this mountain has made me bitter. But the best I could do is follow the rainwater downhill. After some time, I came upon an outcrop adjacent to the bottom side of a cliff face, a small encampment that looked to be abandoned. In the center laid a small fire pit dampened by the light storm above. I hovered my hand inches above the extinguished fire pit, feeling a bit of warmth. I'm sure I thought the fire relieved a lot of tension, feeling as though the world had been taken off my shoulders, but it was more likely the hard thought of a heavy object hitting against the backside of my head and knocking me unconscious. I awoke, eyes blurry, constrained to a tree with what looked like braided clothing. I tried to wipe my eyes, but my hands were also constrained. My mind raced, failing to recall much. But one thing was for certain. I had not been captured by the monastery. This binding does not look like something that was funded by Blizzard salt money. This is someone different. I let out a cry for help and it echoed off of the cliff face that greeted me earlier. I overheard arguing from the campfire in the distance that warned me previous.
Oh shit, he's awake. What are we going to do?
A slightly voice said frantically.
I don't know. You're the one who fricking tied him up.
Another voice rang out in anger.
I didn't know who he was.
After what I could only assume was deliberation, I heard footsteps approaching, and not soon after a face appeared in front of me.
Legendary streamer Tyffee, it's good to meet you.
His voice seems somewhat familiar now.
My name is Felix.
As he said this, my binds were untied. I wiped my foggy eyes to reveal the face of a young man. He took my hand and shook it, but it didn't feel like the warmest of welcomes. I opened my mouth to talk, but he quickly interjected with a question.
You're not with the monastery, are you?
No, I replied, telling them I was, in fact, running from their mob, and explained further what led me here.
Don't worry. You're safe here. But that does explain their increased activity.
A rotund man stepped around the tree where my binds had laid.
My name is Tim,
he says, and leads me back into the camp. He explained to me that their group had once attended the monastery, but once they figured out their secrets they fled, unable to leave the mountain due to the patrolling guards. He summoned some of his friends as we sat around the now roaring campfire. I was soon greeted by many faces.
We all gathered on this mountain because we had something familiar within us. The power of tilt. We first came to this mountain to relieve ourselves of it, to cleanse ourselves of the tilt. But it wasn't long before we figured out it was a gift. We all use the power of tilt to entertain our streams and empower our presence in Twitch itself.
The idea seemed weird at first, but after they explained it further I became intrigued.
It seems like this is something you might need. To use this gift inside of you may even make your stream more powerful, but it comes with a cost.
He held out his hand bearing a small, square, red pill. I picked it up and worked it around in my fingers. As I examined it, he explained further.
This pill allows us to harness the tilt, to control it and bend it to our will. But it comes with a cost.
As he says this, he gestures to a man bound to another tree. He was quiet and his eyes were vacant.
His name was Tyler before he took the pill. But after taking it, all he is a shell for the rage. He couldn't control the tilt and now he's prone to fits and lashing out at those around him.
I couldn't stand to look at him for much longer than I needed to. I averted my eyes from Tyler back toward the pill in my hands, now feeling its weight. Is this kind of internal alchemy even possible? I thought to myself. Tim, seeing the concern on my face, includes one more bit of information.
It's unlikely that we get off this mountain without taking it. Everyone from the monastery knows you are on this mountain.
If what they said is true, then the only way I get back to Twitch chat was here, in my hands. The others left me as I thought and pondered to myself on whether or not I should have taken the red pill. I sat and looked at it in my hands for what felt like an eternity. I came to this mountain to rid myself of this, to get rid of this tilt raging inside me. But this is something I have to do, I said, breaking the silence around me. I walked up to Tim. I'm ready to get off this mountain, I said sternly. He led me back to the tree I was once confined to.
You'll need to stay here. We're not certain on how the drug will react to your system.
Understanding what lay ahead, I accepted my restraints and took the small red pill. Tim walked away, and the sun had set. Tim did say that it may take some time before the dose took effect. I remembered Tyler, and my stomach got uneasy, but I didn't feel anything, except for the spiders on my legs. I kicked my legs around to shake them off, but they persisted. I looked down to my legs, to the feeling of biting and gnawing from the spiders, but nothing was there. I felt my heart pounding out of character. Paranoia setting in. I hear voices in the far distance of the mountain. The pain in my legs climbed around my entire body, engulfing me. Footsteps, pawing on the dirt, became audible as I tried to shake from my prison. But the binds nor the tree gave way. I try to cry out, but a voice speaks up to my side.
you really think you are getting out of this?
A moment of clarity washed around me in waves as I peered through the darkness looking for the voice. I found nothing but the silent forest around me. This must be the effects of the drug I was administered. Just then footsteps harked out over the hill directly ahead of me. A dark figure approached me from the origin of the crunching leaves. I prayed to myself it was one of my new friends I had made, here to aid me. But as the shadow grew closer it became evident that was not the case. A monk holstering a large military rifle came barreling down the hill after hearing my presence. Excitedly reaching for her radio, she called in the find.
I have found Tyffee. I will proceed as ordered.
She inched closer, reaching for the rifle slung around her shoulder, and raised the barrel to eye level and closed the distance. My heart starts racing with every step she took, and I began to feel lightheaded, darkness flooding my periphery.
This is the end, Tyffee. Our secrets die here with you.
Just when the last word snuck from her teeth, my vision went with the rest of my body. The feeling of pins and needles decorated the length of my body as muted sounds of gunshots bounced in my brain. Anxiety left my body, as flashes of red danced in my brain with every sound. Suddenly all noise ceased, and I was just left with a silent racing heart slowing to a calm thud. I opened my eyes to a vision I had never seen outside of my gaming career. Before me lay a silent monk covered in a thin layer of blood. It was blood. I looked down to my body now in heavy pain, but only found scrapes, cuts, and a burn in the palm of my hand in the pattern of an adaptive combat rifle barrel. My ear rang audibly. My chest suddenly tightened up and it became hard to swallow. Just as the panic of what I had seen started to set in, a voice cried out of the radio, but it was so distorted it was unintelligible. Reinforcements. In a mad frenzy I grabbed the radio, took to my feet, and rushed down the mountain. My start down the hill was clumsy but swift. The only thing slowing me down was the occasional glancing blow to a tree in the dimly lit forest. Just then, a clearing, a great break from the trees, and the moon peeked from behind the clouds for only a moment. Before me lay a dirt road, a note of the outside world. I felt relief. I needed to stop, but my legs wouldn't stop moving. I tripped and fall as my only option and landed with my back to the ground, sounding off a uncharacteristic loud metallic ring. My body was winded as I looked up to the sky, frightened from the grim sight uphill. In this moment all I could do was breathe, and look around myself for anything to keep me going. As I got up my hand glanced over a circular metal door affixed to the ground. Searching for salvation I looked to take a peek inside. As I opened the metal compartment surrounded by foliage, I wormed my body over the edge and fell into the now ajar hole in the ground. It was warm, almost as if it was temperature controlled. I rose to my feet, and within the pitch black, I put my hands in front of me and walked forward until I found a wall. With my hands affixed to the wall I scanned down it, moving alongside the wall until I found the switch. To my relief I flipped the switch and the lights come on. It seems like an old bunker of sorts, I thought to myself. Piled on the dusty walls were pages upon pages of diagrams and blueprints. And in the corner of the room, laid on a small metal desk, sat an old 90s era PC monitor. I plunged the power key that was flush with the monitor surface, the screen crackled, and it brightened into life. A small tear ran down my face. It was the first computer I've seen all week. The colors improved on the dust-covered screen to show a half-played game of Warcraft. Confusion on my face, I exited the game and searched the computer's desktop for any means of communicating to the outside world, and there lying in the center of the screen, a small icon, AOL. I activated the program and waited for it to boot up. Looking around the room, my eyes laid on the dust-written documents strewn across the wall, schematics of some kind. A closer look brought to light a familiar shape, a small, square, red pill. Moving forward to get a closer look, I banged my shin on a large apparatus constructed of metal and glass. I scanned over the device that stood nearly as tall as myself, but with my limited knowledge I was only left to guess that it could have been some sort of sublimator. I turned back to the computer, only filled with more questions. As I looked down to the keyboard to input my old AOL password, I see a pamphlet laden with flashy graphics. I pick it up only to find that it was completely dust-free. The front page showed a new PC tower covered in gaudy LEDs and showy, red glowing coolant flowing through it. The text above read, "Please, rig." I stopped for a moment, but only a moment, before it all sank in. This was it. This was my way out. I reached a steady hand to the radio on my hip, and while bringing it to my mouth I said calmly, "Jeff, I know your secret. I'm done running. Meet me at sundown. In the clearing. You know where." Sunset came, and I was prepared. I stood in the middle of the clearing, with the sun beaming down on my back. I kept an eye on the road and kept the woods to my back. As soon as the last beam of light from the sun disappeared over the horizon, a large Humvee pulled up the dirt road, tires caked in mud. Right on time. The door opened, but I could see through the tinted windows, metal shining through. It was Jeff. He stepped out of the car, just yards away, and faced me. But he was different now. He was now much larger, and over his body sprawled a network of hoses running clear liquids to and fro over his metal torso. The tube seemingly carried a saline solution throughout his body. But I was not startled. "It all ends here, Jeff. I know your secret. I know you created the rage pill, and you use it on those poor people in the monastery to farm their salt for your greedy endeavors."
"Oh, do you?"
he replied, seemingly unfazed. "Yes, and I also know about that contraption you have down there. Do you plan on installing that in your new computers?"
"I do, in fact. And once those computers get distributed, I will be able to use the sublimator to create an aerosol spreading rage all over the world. Every household will feel the power of tilt, and I will no longer have to do my salt mining here on the mountain."
His blood began to boil, and the hoses began to pump the clear liquid faster and faster. His body swelled from the pressure, and his eyes became red with rage, almost in an instant. Just before he charged forward, I reached once again to my radio and I called out, "Now, my friend." Just then a flurry of bullets originating from the tree line flew past me on the clearing, and straight towards Kaplan. My friends from the camp posted just outside his line of sight with the perfect ambush, but Jeff was unfazed. His assault still barreling towards me, his shoulder knocked me clear into the air, and onto my back several feet away. The bullets were no use. Now standing in the center of the clearing, Kaplan opens fire from his right shoulder, a spray of kerosene and flame across the border of the tree line. This isn't fair, I thought to myself. This man literally made himself OP. As he started his next charge, I hurried to my feet and tried to run off to the side, but it was only met with another heavy blow from his now open right shoulder. Surely my ribs were broken. But this was my only chance to leave and to expose Jeff Kaplan for his crimes against the Overwatch community.
You didn't think a small scrub lord like you was going to be able to beat me? And what do they call you? The legendary streamer Tyffee? What a pity.
That was in all the tricks I have, I said as I fling an empty vape to Kaplan's feet from my pocket, and with my other hand pressed a button on the small handheld radio. Just then a large plume of 3 milligram cherry-flavored vape exploded from the shelter below us, throwing Kaplan off his footing. The air, now dense with vapor cloud, provided an ample amount of cover and blinded Kaplan. Through the haze I could hear his metallic coughing, for Kaplan wasn't used to the vape. But I was born in it. I planted my feet firmly on the ground, the pins and needles feeling of the night before come rushing back. But this time I was focused. I was ready. Through the dense fog I rocketed toward my assailant, jumping through the air and landing on his back, only to grab foothold on the hoses that networked his body. Grabbing hold, my arms buckle under the load of pulling the large tubes, veins cropping up from my forearm as my grip tightened. I felt my arms were about to explode, but just before I was ready to give up, I flung myself from his back under the release of the pipes. I flew yards through the air only to land with a heavy thud into the grass invert that I was so familiar with from this journey. I brought myself to my feet, hearing the cries and splashes of Jeff Kaplan through the mist. The battle was won. I stood there as the cherry-flavored smog dispersed itself, revealing a small skinny man. He looked to be made of skin and bone, but after a moment he started to stand, only to fall to his knees once more.
Well, finish it,
he said, knowing full well he had lost his power to win and control of his tilt. But as he said these words I thought back to the monk in the woods laying silent and covered in carnage. Wincing at the thought of it, I turned my back on the now feeble man. Not again, I said as a large jet-black limousine pulls up the dirt road. The driver's side window rolls down to reveal Deadshot, my butler.
You contacted me through AOL, fam, ain't you heard of Uber?
He said as I stepped into the car and we started our drive far away from that mountain.
It seems as though Tyffee learned a valuable lesson this past week. Controlling your anger and clearly thinking through your problems can help in most cases, even against giant tilt-infested cyborg developers. These are the only bits of information we have on the condition of Tyffee. As always, we will keep in touch on any discoveries made on his whereabouts. May God have mercy on his soul. Now back to your regularly scheduled program.